running a division at ARAMARK and then helping people rehabilitate after prison. There's something missing there. So what's the gap?
Los Angeles is the gang capital of the world, unfortunately. I'm having lunch at the Homegirl Cafe with my friend, and he's asking me to get involved. And as I'm eating lunch, I'm looking around at the employees. I'm looking how they're...
Tom Vozzo, CEO of Homeboy Industries, the largest social enterprise dedicated to helping former gang-involved men and women transform their lives through job training and human services. Through his leadership, Homeboy now serves 10,000 men and women each year. Why is this population not able to get the jobs before they end up in a certain point where Homeboy has to serve them?
Who we serve are current gang members who have been incarcerated. So they come out of the prison and jail system. They voluntarily come to Homeboy. And when they walk through our doors, they're saying, I'm tired of gang life. I want something different. Can you help?
What is the one thing that you took from running a multi-billion-dollar organization and that you deployed into Homeboy? Welcome to Success Story. I'm your host, Scott Clary. The Success Story podcast is part of the HubSpot podcast network. They've supported the podcast for almost 2 years now. Obviously, if you have never used HubSpot or have ever heard of it, you're just tuning into the podcast for the first time because I've spoken about HubSpot a lot. But HubSpot is a tool that you need if you are a business leader. And now they're helping you incorporate AI into your processes. See, AI is eating the web as we speak. And what that means for a business leader is this: the time to embrace AI technology is now, because for people like us, automation helps us do more with less while continuing to meet and exceed those incredibly high business expectations we set for ourselves. It's basically magic, or honestly as close as we're going to get as business leaders. And if you haven't tried HubSpot's new AI features, you have to do that. Content Assistant and ChatSpot are two brand new tools that will immediately save you and your team tons of time. HubSpot's features run on ChatGPT's tech to help you make compelling content and manage your CRM way faster than before. We're talking ad copy, data analytics, workflow automations, all with a chat command. So head to HubSpot.com/artificial-intelligence. Today, my guest is Tom Vozzo, CEO of Homeboy Industries, the largest social enterprise dedicated to helping former gang-involved men and women transform their lives through job training and human services. His global business expertise and proven track record of leading highly successful businesses in the service, retail, and distribution industries prompted Homeboy Industries founder Father Greg Boyle to ask him to take the helm in 2012. Since then, Vozzo has led the agency forward, bringing his business expertise and vision to implement a strategic and mission-driven development plan for the organization that has resulted in growth all around. Through his leadership, Homeboy now serves 10,000 men and women each year. In 2011, Vozzo retired as the executive vice president of ARAMARK, a $13 billion corporation, during which time he served as CEO and president of ARAMARK Uniform and Career Apparel Group. He also served as an executive officer and management committee member of ARAMARK Corporation from 2004 to 2011. During his time, the corporation transitioned from public to private via a management private equity-led $8 billion buyout. Vozzo is a member of the advisory board for the Salvation Army Southern California Division and has served on executive committees of a number of industry-related boards.
You know, I often think back in my life about, I've had a lot of great experiences, and in many ways I feel like I lived a charmed life. But I had a seminal moment earlier in my career about business, because I love business. I found myself have a natural ability to kind of run companies, understand what it takes to make the company successful from a sales standpoint, from an employee standpoint. And so this is back when I was running the uniform set of businesses for ARAMARK. It was a $2 billion set of businesses. And think back to the 2008 recession, which is different than the recession we just went through in this pandemic. In 2008, it was sort of a monetary crisis, and it was interest rates and money flow. But essentially what happened was, within a 4-month time frame, the economy shrunk 10 to 15%. And the businesses I was running, that business shrunk just about the same amount. It was a uniform business. Number of employees out there is how many people in uniform. So we worked super hard to make our numbers, and we knew the year end was coming, and we did workforce reductions. We were kind of trying to be smart about keeping our long-term plans in place, but also having making the short-term numbers. And so the year was ending, and I still remember this. This is the seminal moment. We at that time, I lived in California. I went back to visit my in-laws in Philadelphia 2 days before Christmas. And I'm driving along. My wife and I had to go out food shopping on behalf of my mother-in-law. And I remember in the raining parking lot out in suburban Philadelphia at a supermarket, and the chairman of the corporation calls me up. And he usually calls up right before Christmas to wish everybody happy holidays. But this time it wasn't about wishing happy holidays. It was about, Tom, are we going to make the numbers for year end? And, I dutifully kind of talked through how we did our reductions, that even though there was a 15% sales decline, we're going to reduce profits by 7%. So we're still going to make $150 million of profit, not revenue, $150 million of profit. And as I'm telling him, I'm thinking we're doing a pretty good job. Well, he turns to me on the phone and says, that's not good enough. We made promises to the street, and we have to hit our numbers. And you've got to do all you can to get back to your original number, which is trying to find another $10 million. And so I'm thinking to myself, as he's telling me that story and telling me what I got to do, I have to now, in the back of my mind, I know what it's going to take to cut that extra $10 million. I have to now do more workforce reduction, fire more people who we've counted on for many years in our company, who we probably need down the line. And thinking, this doesn't make sense. This is not planning for the long term. This is not a people-driven company at that point. This is clearly a shareholder-driven company, which that's the rules of the game. Well-run companies have this balance of shareholder value balanced against employees. But in the time when push comes to shove, it's always shareholders winning out. And I also know how the numbers work. I know that just by us going from $150 million of profit to $160 million, what our commitment was, it's not going to make a hill of beans difference in our long-term valuation. So I'm thinking, for the sense of pride that we are good, smart business people to make the street, we're actually now hurting people's livelihoods along the way. And so to me, that was the moment where I loved business all along. I loved sort of running companies and making it a good place to work for people. I realized the rules of the game I understood, but few of those rules don't sit well with me. And that, why do you always have to leave employees behind in the zeal to sort of do the highest performance on Wall Street? And so at that point, I thought to myself, well, listen, I'm not in charge. I take the orders from the CEO, and if that's what they got, that's what we got to do. But in my mind, that was my point. It's like, at some point, I got to find something different in life. That while I've been very successful in the business world, there's got to be a way that we can run businesses and not sacrifice employees and people when push comes to shove. That you can kind of keep things in balance even when times get tough. And it was interesting as I reflect back, having those feelings now, over 14, 15 years ago, and then now my life over this last decade at Homeboy Industries, and how having people be first and foremost in what we do, how my perspective of running an organization changes.
So we're talking, when that conversation happened, that you said that was about 10 to 15 years, yeah. 2008, right? The crisis. So that was a few years ago. Do you feel as though, like, I know what you're doing is drastically different than that mindset, but do you feel as though businesses have actually evolved past that? Are we still stuck in this stakeholder first mentality in 2023?
We are still stuck in it. We have not evolved past that. I think it's very difficult for us to kind of shake loose those constructs, And listen, I want to be really clear. I love businesses. I do speeches on behalf of Homeboy, and I lead off by saying I'm a committed capitalist. And in some audiences, doesn't play so well. But I think well-run businesses are good for our society, right? And for the most part, businesses do right by their employees. And in this narrative that's out there that all business folks are evil folks, that's no. Having a business that employs people, where people can find dignity in their job and dignity to the labor they do, add value to our society, right? But I think back to your question, why we haven't shaken off those constraints is you think about the reward systems that's in place and how it's almost a cliche to talk about, public companies have this quarterly mentality but yet, almost 2/3 of the businesses now in the United States, the large businesses are owned by private equity. They still have a very short-term profit-oriented mentality. I think we have to come up with a way of having a longer-term view for businesses, and clearly those businesses that depend upon people, service industry depends on people, has to rank that as high as shareholder value. And if you look at really the well-run companies over multiple decades, is the ones who sort of put their people more up front relative to the other companies that it's just more profit and financial driven.
Now let's look at the stark contrast between a company that was run with that legacy mindset and what you're doing with Homeboy. So let's pick like the number one lesson because obviously then you move forward in your life, in your career, and you start Homeboy. And I want to understand what gave you the idea to do this and where that inspiration came from. But what is the single most important lesson that you learned at ARAMARK that you are adamant about making sure that Homeboy does not do that thing?
Oh, I thought you were going the other way and say, what lesson did I bring?
No, I want to hear the opposite. I want to hear the one thing that gave you stress, that was traumatic, that was it this one particular instance?
Yeah, without a doubt. Now listen, so I want to clearly say, again, I love businesses. I love work. There's a lot of good in corporate America. There's a lot of good learnings. This whole issue of leadership development, people development. The for-profit business sector has that figured out really well, most definitely. But when it comes down to sort of what is the mission, what is an organization about, and oftentimes, not often, nearly every time, in the for-profit sector, it is about driving shareholder value, profits first, and it's that sort of mission to not just increase the share price, but to drive sales, to drive profitability, and well-run companies do a good job of having more people share in that pie. But without a doubt, think about if the audience out here is listening and you're in a business and you're actually trying to make a tough decision, how often do you sort of say, well, how's this going to affect our employees? How often does that question factor in to a very difficult business decision? More often it's like, is it good for our market share? Is it good for our profitability? Can we afford to make it that way? Very few times is it like, if we're a people-oriented company, is it good for our employees over the long term?
And then let's flip it then. So the question that you thought I was going to ask. So what is the one thing that you took from running a multi-billion-dollar organization and that you deployed into Homeboy?
Yeah. Listen, so particularly ARAMARK is a service company, and so you're not successful because you have a certain patent or a product or a technology. You have a service, and that service goes from client to client, and how well you perform is how well you get your next set of businesses. So it is about leadership development. ARAMARK was a global company, very decentralized. It spent a lot of effort and time of training up the next generation of leaders so that the organization kept growing. And so it's bringing that point of how do you kind of develop leaders and managers in an organization to grow organically as you would want to in any organization. And it's that people focus of investing in people from a development standpoint. The difference is ARAMARK did it because they knew if they had great leaders, they were going to make more money. We're doing that at Homeboy, is to having great leaders and allow more people to heal and get out of gang life and the life of crime.
Amazing. Okay, so then walk me through, because a service-based business I don't see the path into what you're doing at Homeboy. I don't see the clear right. The clear thread between running a division at ARAMARK and then helping people rehabilitate after prison, right? There's something missing there. So what's the gap? Sure. How did you get into this?
Yeah, how did I get into it? So back to that seminal moment, I knew at that time, boy, I got to find a different way of going about this. No idea what that would be. But also, we were owned by private equity, sort of had a 4-year lockup. I was going to work 4 more years, do my best job I can, and then go find a different chapter in my life. Another good thing what public companies, big companies focus on is being local in the community. And so for many years, we were always encouraged to be on and help out local charities and boards. So I was on the board of Salvation Army of Los Angeles. And from there, I was so impressed with how the Salvation Army sort of, their employees, their officers, put their time and energy into helping the most marginalized, forgotten people, the homeless people along the way. And so a fellow board member who was on that board knew I had left ARAMARK and invited me down to the Homegirl Cafe for lunch. Now, again, Homeboy is the largest gang rehabilitation program in the country, thereby the world. Los Angeles is the gang capital of the world, unfortunately. But here we have Homeboy, a 30-year organization, helping people get out of gang life and being very successful at it. And part of it is having social enterprise businesses and helping people heal through the context of a job. But I'm having lunch at the Homegirl Cafe with my friend, and he's asking me to get involved. No, he knew I had time on my hand. And as I'm eating lunch, I'm looking around at the employees serving us, the homegirls and the homeboys. And I'm looking how they're doing a good job. They're working hard. They're smiling. They're talking to customers. They're interacting. And as this realization waves over me that I would have never hired any of those folks back in my for-profit job. And that here is this workforce that it seems like a pretty good workforce. And I say that in the context that in my last 8 years in my for-profit job, we made 40 acquisitions in those 8 years. We integrated them. So you have a sense as you're looking at potential companies, you walk the shop floor, you have a sense of the culture and how the workforce works. And here I'm looking at this Homeboy workforce saying, wow, I know nothing about this population. I know I would have never hired them. And yet they're doing a good job. And as I heard that they're changing their life around. So when I had the opportunity my friend wanted me to get involved on the board. I wanted to get involved, but I always admire the Salvation Army officers who they've dedicated their professional life to helping people. So I had time on my hand and wasn't going to go work again, but I figured, well, let me volunteer. And so as I said, as opposed to being a board member, you have something I can come and volunteer and do. And at the time, Homeboy was having financial problems, particularly in its social enterprise businesses. Clearly, they needed an old guy with some gray hair and knew how to run businesses. And so I started volunteering. And did I ever think I was going to be a nonprofit guy? No. Did I ever think I was going to kind of go work with gang members? Absolutely not. I knew nothing about gang members. I knew nothing about the people, their struggles in their society. But what I soon came to learn, I soon fell in love with the organization. And what I saw was that in the context of a job, people are dramatically transforming their life and really becoming upstanding members of our community. And that's what, as we think about all of us, what I want in society is for everybody to succeed, right? Mm-hmm. And so here's Homeboys helping the most demonized, forgotten people move their life forward. And so I signed on as a volunteer. A couple months later, the organization was going through some more financial troubles. Father Greg Boyle, our founder, someone on the board said, hey, why don't you ask Tom to see if he can spend more time with us? And he asked me to come in for the first time to be the CEO. And I got a little bit demurred. I didn't want to work full time. I sort of wanted to go off and travel with my wife. But I was really intrigued. Intrigued to also be in the vicinity of Father Greg, who is a living saint. And I said yes. And look, I had all the hubris of a corporate CEO. I think, okay, I'll do this for 6 months to a year. I'll get them straightened out, and then I go off and do something different. And lo and behold, I'm here 10 years later, loving every minute that I'm there. Learned so much more about business, certainly so much about the poor in our society. Learned so much more about my own spirituality, and through the homies, I've learned to go on my own spiritual journey and find more balance in my life. And so that's why I'm happy to always talk about Homeboy. There's lots of things to say, but I just feel like it's coincidence or providence that sort of led me to having that lunch at the Homegirl Cafe and jumping in.
One of my favorite tools for the podcast that you're listening to right now is Munch. Munch is an AI-powered tool that takes a podcast, a webinar, an interview, you name it, and it turns it into tons of media-ready social clips. And then it takes it a step further by making sure that each clip aligns with marketing trends. It does keyword research, so it ensures the success of the clip. And it doesn't stop there. Instant subtitles, pre-written social posts, multilingual. It does 8 different languages. So whether or not you're an individual creator or an entire production team, Munch is a game changer, a time and a resource saver. Imagine having an AI analyze every nuance of your video and creating engaging, trend-ready clips. This is what Munch does for me. And remember, Munch isn't just for creators. It's for any scenario where long-form content is produced. Content teams, production companies, studios, Munch helps an insane amount. So head to getmunch.com to get started. They put together a special promo for all Success Story podcast listeners. Use the promo code SUCCESS to get 15% off your subscription. That's getmunch.com, promo code SUCCESS. Munch is a gold mine for all of your content needs. Everything happens for a reason, right? Everything always does. So I want to understand a little bit more about the people that you serve. So at a high level, you're helping people that are involved in gangs get jobs, probably be a little bit of living a better life, living in society in a better way than through gangs. But help me understand the person that you serve best. Is somebody who is in a gang that hasn't been incarcerated? Is this like a rehabilitation program after they have been incarcerated? Who do you actually serve? And then also I want to, I guess, ask a tough question, and it's not meant to be insensitive, but it's meant to better understand the people that you serve. Why would they not? Why is gang the default? Why is this population not able to get the jobs before they end up in a certain point where Homeboy has to serve them? There's a reason why, and I want to understand that so that can better frame the service that you're offering.
Yeah, no, all good questions, Scott. Let me first say who we serve are gang members, current gang members who have been incarcerated. So they come out of the prison and jail system, and they voluntarily come to Homeboy. There's not court mandated. They're not told to be here. They voluntarily come to Homeboy, and when they walk through our doors, they're saying, "I'm tired of gang life. I want something different. Can you help me?" And we're there to help. To my surprise, I've learned so much being there. To my surprise, many of the men and women we serve are second, third generation gang members. They are jumped into a gang at a young age, when they're 12, 13 years old. They have by their uncle, by their mother, by their parent, by their father. They almost, in my view, my words, they're like almost preordained to be a gang member, the next generation gang members, because that's all they know. But it was interesting. So to part of your question, why a gang, right? And I remember early on in my time, I'm sitting there with Father Greg asking similar questions along the way. And he almost kind of distilled it down to saying, and this was sort of what he said to me, that the difference between him and I, why we're not in a gang, and the men and women that we serve who are in gang, is that we had one parent who loved us and was there for us and took care of us. And if you think, and as we think about all our people we serve, they didn't have a parent in their life, or their parents were their abusive. Their parents told them not to go to school. Don't go to school. Drop out of school to the 8th grade because their parent needed them to be the lookout on the corner for a drug deal. They are just abused by their parents. Every one of the people we serve are victims of complex trauma. They join a gang thinking that's going to be their family. That's their way out of that terrible household that they have, that unsafe household that their gang, their homies are going to take care of them. It's a false hope. It's a false feeling. Because what happens is the gang turns on them, they do something bad, they get incarcerated, they go to jail, and they're left on their own. So when they're coming out of the prison, and listen, we deal with serious violent offenders. When they're coming out of prison, they don't want to go back to gang life. They know it's a false self that leads them there. They know there's no long term. They also realize they join a gang and they do dangerous things because they don't think they're going to live past 30 years old. So, having threats of long sentences is not going to sort of change people's approach whether they do crime or not. But when they're in prison, they want to make a change. When they're coming out of prison, they want to live that lifestyle they dream about. They see other people living. And so we're there to open our doors to say, listen, we can help you. And our secret sauce, it's as simple as this. We don't judge them by the color of their skin, their tattoo on their face, the gang they've been, the felony they had. We just bring them in. And our simple sauce is relationship, trust them, because first time they ever got trust in their life, and we love them. We have positive relationships there for them, and we become their greater family. And that's what enables somebody to turn their life around. So for society to think, and this is what drives me crazy about society, for society to think that we can, as a society, release tens of thousands of prisoners each year out of just state of California, tens of thousands, and that society think that, well, if they just worked harder and smarter, they can go get a job and thereby not join a gang. It's just nutty because our folks are victims of complex trauma. They got to heal from that trauma. And what we do at Homeboy will help them heal while they're working, so then after Homeboy, they can get a job with other companies.
So one thing that I'm curious about is that point when they're in jail, when they're incarcerated, and they're looking for something different and something better. But that's not always the case. So what do we have to do to allow them to look towards something better? Because in jail, recidivism rates increase exponentially. And I'm sure, like my background, I'm Canadian, and I know that Canada is not even remotely as bad as the U.S. in terms of recidivism. If you put someone in jail, in certain jails, in certain environments, their chance of committing another crime goes up X%, right? Because they're surrounded by the population that's not helping them rehabilitate. So how does a jail, or how come some individuals are looking for a better life, whereas some individuals you see high recidivism rates? What is the differentiator?
Yes, and I would answer it this way. So let me first say, think about those statistics of recidivism going back into the prison system under
Correct.
a new charge, right? So a number of years ago, there was an independent study of Homeboy done by UCLA, and it showed that people who have been part of our Homeboy program only have a 30% recidivism rate after 2 years of being out. Mm-hmm. That compares to the statewide average, to your point, of 70%. And so here we are 2.5 times better than the statewide average. So your question is, why recidivate? Why do people go back in the jail system? And I almost say, well, why do people go back in the jail system at a 2 times more rate than they do after they come in to be a part of Homeboy? And the answer is simply that we invest in them. We try to help them heal from their trauma, and so they can become resilient to take on what society throws at them. In the U.S., people come out of the prison with a massive amount of debt, not just restitution charges, but court costs and all. Let me tell you this one story. So we have at Homeboy a number of social enterprise businesses. We have a Homeboy bakery, and here's where we make artisan bread, and we have 11 bread routes go around, and we deliver them to restaurants all throughout Los Angeles. We also have farmers markets. An artisan bakery means handmade breads, and so there's nothing better about breaking down walls and enemies. So when 2 enemies stand at that bread table side by side, shoulder to shoulder, they're rolling dough. You can't demonize somebody you're in relationship with, you're working next to. And so these 2 guys from rival gangs were able to work it out over the bread table, right? So that's the value of having that type of work that we do. And we sell the bread, at farmers markets. Early on in my time at Homeboy, I was walking through the bakery, and trying to be friendly and talk to people. And I overheard one of our best sellers at the farmers markets, 26 farmers markets around Los Angeles, George. He's one of our best sellers. Every time he takes the breads out to the markets, he completely sells out and comes home early. And he's had a gift for a guy. I mean, a certain amount of charisma, right? And so I overheard him talking to our manager, asking for the weekend off. Well, the weekends are important days for farmers markets. So manager said yes. And then I go up to talk to George, and I just want to chit chat. Hey, what are you going to do? You going away? You going to go to a ball game? What are you going to have? What are you going to do? And he looks at me and says, "I'm reporting in." And I said, "Well, what do you mean reporting in?" Well, he was going to report into county jail on Friday night and spend 3 days there, come back on Tuesday. And he was doing that because he came out of jail and prison with debt. He had costs of his parole officer, court costs. He has all these costs, and like society thinks that people on the day one coming out of prison, they can start paying off their debt, and they don't even have a job yet, right? It's just nuts, and that sort of says what society throws up against them. And so So at that time, you can go to LA County Jail and you can spend 3 days in jail and earn off some of the money that you owe. And so I walked away that evening thinking, that's really responsible for George. He's trying to do it the right way. He could have gone to his former gang and say, hey, let me get some money. He could have gone to a loan shark and borrowed money. He didn't want to do that high interest rates. He wanted to do it the good way, the clean way. All right. So all weekend I'm thinking about it. I see George following Tuesday. Hey, George, I went up to him quickly. Hey, how'd it go? And I see stress on his face. And I'm thinking, what happened? And he said, when he came out of prison, he was able to get custody of his 2 children, 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. And he has sole custody of it. He has no caregiver. He has no family support. They're in the gang. He doesn't live in the neighborhood any longer. So the caregiver who was going to watch his kids that weekend while he reported to jail called at the last minute and couldn't make it. And so he had this choice, or almost no choice, because he committed to going to jail. So he left his 10-year-old and 8-year-old at home in their apartment on their own for 3 days while he was in county jail. You just imagine the stress as a father, what you go through thinking, did you make the right decision? Are they going to be okay? How's it going to work? The end of the story is they turned out okay. Everything was fine, right? But as I'm listening to this story, seeing his stress, I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I don't know if I would have done it that way. I mean, so you have to pause and think, not to judge, because our folks coming out of prison, so they're faced with impossible choices to live the normal life that we want them to live, right? And yet, we just have to be there for them and help them some way, get them more money so they don't have these choices, but don't judge them by their actions. So that was a long way answering your question. Is why a high recidivism rate in the United States? Because people come out of prison and still have all these stressors to get done, what society throws at them, and they just kind of give up. A lot of them just give up and say, oh, I'll just go back to the gang because it's easier money to be made, and I'll sort of live life that way. While I may die at 30, I don't have as much stress. There are folks, though, who almost everybody knows deep down what they're doing is not right, and they want to do it in a more honest and better way.
And let's talk about the progression of somebody that comes out of a gang. So then when you come out of a gang, I'm assuming you're not, these are general assumptions, but I'm assuming you're not coming out with a college degree. So if you are looking to make a living wage and you're looking to displace money from illicit activities, it can be like highly lucrative. How do you fully move away from gang life? Because it's not going to be raising a family on making artisanal bread. There has to be progression. There has to be some way to make it. I don't know what the amount is, but there has to be an amount that has to be made where you're making 60, 70, 80. I don't know what that is. And then you can actually support a family. You can put into retirement. So what is the way to actually support people so that they can become full members, not just rehabilitated, but on par with someone else who was getting a job to support a whole family and retire?
Yeah, and that's the nub of the challenge, right? And I put it in this frame. You know, the working poor in our society have a lot of challenges, and just as you talked about, you can't provide for your family by being among the working poor. And what I'm here to say is, you know, in the United States, the poverty rate has been the same for 45 years, same narrow band, 12 to 13%. And so as a society, we haven't figured out how to help people, lift people out of poverty along the way. But what I've learned at Homeboy is, there actually is a way to help people who are poor and the working poor, the folks who are demonized. And so to your question about gang members as they come into Homeboy, and only 40% of them have a high school diploma, so 60% do not. So while we think people get educated in the prison system, most people still don't get educated in the prison system. And so but what we do is, again, primarily we're a human services agency. We help people heal from their trauma. We have therapists on staff. We have homies going to therapy. We have NA, AA classes. There's domestic violence counseling classes. We have high school classes. We allow people pathways to college, junior college. We get them in. We take off their tattoos. All this in the context of while they're working with us. We give them a lot of space to do that work. And so what we see is that not only primarily they need to heal, but then to your point, the subpoint, then we have to upskill them so that they can succeed in our economy. Again, another statistic: 90% of the folks that come out of the prison system have never worked in a business for more than 4 weeks in their whole life, and so they don't have the muscle memory of how to work. So, with all those challenges, I'm here to say this is a good workforce once they go through an organization like Homeboy and become resilient and learn the skills. We have in Los Angeles a Zagat-rated cafe, Homegirl Cafe. Only 7 other restaurants have as high a rating in downtown Los Angeles, and it's fully run by gang members and felons. And so I often think about the workforce we have at Homeboy is really good. So it's as good of a workforce as you're going to get anywhere else. And so in any workforce, you're going to have this sort of people who sort of move up the ladder and have upward mobility. And those are the ones who will get 70, 80, 90,000 a year. And as well as you're going to have people at the front line level who struggle because they don't have enough skills to move higher. Our role is to help people heal, get that first transitional job, and then help them get the next level jobs above that. We're proud of the fact that over half of our management team are former clients. And so, again, I know our workforce is just as any workforce. They just won't get the market-based wages because of their backgrounds. And so part of my thing is as I thought about writing this book, what lessons I learned, it's also kind of trying to challenge people in the business world.
Yeah.
Let's hire this population because they're as good of a workforce as any other workforce, and they're very loyal. And our folks deserve the right to have upward mobility in the job just like any other person who doesn't have a felony and not coming out of a gang. And that they can shine based upon their own ability. And we just got to give them that chance.
Now, how do we really change the landscape? Because we're talking about changing significant hiring practices for large organizations, and that's what has to happen. So what are the things, the frameworks, or even the ways that we can make businesses feel comfortable about changing hiring practices? Because right now it's probably a little bit of, well, if I have 2 candidates, I'm going to go for the one that wasn't incarcerated or doesn't have a felony. It just seems safer. It's the way that you're talking about legacy business and how we're shareholder centric and shareholder focused. I mean, there's a lot of things that are broken in business. And so this is just another thing that hasn't changed quickly, right? So how do we fix that?
And we have to change the mindset of people in companies, upper management in companies. Companies need to believe that they're part of the fabric of our society and that they contribute to in a positive way or a negative way to, again, the fabric of our society. And so what do I mean by that? So listen, so if a company has this mindset that their role is to have a quality job and that they believe they have quality jobs for all their employees, meaning living wage, benefits, predictable scheduling, upward mobility, right? That's all we're asking. Many companies have all that. What I'm asking is that they hire people who don't have access to that, or historically not have had access to that. And to do that, it takes a commitment. You have to bring extra resources in. You have to not worry about treating people equally all up and down the chain, but realizing that if you're going to hire the working poor, the demonized, that you have to overinvest. You have to sort of give them more, in some ways, more time off. Another example, my administrative assistant, secretary, I had a Homeboy. Young woman, we try to, in all our jobs, we try to have them for our clients, right? So she, in and out of youth camp, which is youth jail in Los Angeles, at a young age. She became in and out. She became a single mother at age 17. She came to Homeboy without a high school degree. She was a Homeboy 3 years. Single mother, lived in shelters. She had no family support, lived in shelters along the way, but wanted to do better for her and her daughter, became my executive assistant, and she was a good, hardworking employee, just like you would want. So at Homeboy, any company, we have a board meeting 4 times a year. And they start at 7:30 in the morning. My assistant would get to work at 6:30 to make sure the room's set up, the water's out, the copies are made, just that's what we want. She was a dedicated employee. Well, there was a time where the night before one of our board meetings, her parole officer calls her and says to her that she needs to report in for, just a regular update meeting with him the next day at 8 a.m. She said, well, can I come at 10 a.m.? Because I have to go to my job, needs me early in the morning. And he said, no, if you don't show up at 8 a.m., I'm going to violate you and you'll be back in prison. And so now, of course, we're homeboy. We get it. We understand that she now has to go. But so the challenges that is thrown up to her from the system that's in place makes it hard. And so we need employers who recognize, oh, let's give her that day off. Don't worry about it. Go to your parole officer. Come back. And once you give them that, once you say, don't worry about it, we have you covered, they become much more loyal to your organization.
No kidding,
and they're going to work even harder. But oftentimes you get this thinking process in a business like, well, if we give her that time to go see a parole officer, we're going to have to now give somebody else time to go see their whatever. No, I'm saying no. You don't have to treat people equally. Now, if you have any attorneys listening and they're probably screaming, saying, oh, of course you got to treat people equally. I'm saying you take, what I've learned at Homeboy is you got to take a case-by-case basis. Don't worry about setting precedent, because the precedent is you're going to help people for where they need help, and not worry about these small workplace rules you're concerned about. So that's why, as businesses hire folks, you got to have that type of mindset.
And I can, I want to comment on that too. Like as an employer, when you go out of your way to do things like that, like I've never experienced anything like that in my career, but I mean, I can understand that if you give somebody a case by case and you work with them as a human being, that person is going to go above and beyond, and they're going to be so, like you mentioned, so committed to your organization, so committed to just making sure that they give 110% of themselves because you're going out of your way to support. And that's the way you should work with other people. Like everybody's a human, everybody has things going on, and this is a thing, but know that it's a marginalized group that is, it's not even in the discussion right now, which is the issue.
It's not even a discussion. And what people do is they hide behind, I've seen this, hide behind company rules, company precedents. And yeah, so I'm asking companies to change rules, but really what I'm asking is individually we can all extend ourselves to somebody less fortunate and to help them out and give them a moment of grace and some space.
And okay, so let's talk about, eating your own dog food and working with the people that you serve. Let's talk about the success and some of the things that you've done in Homeboy, like the growth of the company, the growth of the organization, some of the strategies you deployed, and basically the strategies you've deployed. I mean, the people that are deploying these strategies are the people that are this marginalized group of ex-incarcerated felons, people that have gone to jail. So let's talk about some of the success and the things you've done. I mean, it's interesting that you combine this like for-profit business acumen with a non-profit organization. So walk me through some things you've done in the past 10 years.
Yeah. And so, listen, it is about a combination, and that's where I feel lucky to be in both worlds along the way. So let me first say Homeboy Industries was founded by Father Greg Boyle, Jesuit priest, 34 years ago. And his first station as a priest was Dolores Mission, the poorest parish in the Archdiocese. Wanted to get people out of gang life, hit upon this obvious notion, if you get them a job with make enough money for food and shelter, they're not going to run with the gang for food and shelter. So fast forward all these years later, we're now an organization that we have 10 social enterprise businesses. And so we have our cafe, and we have a bakery, we have farmers markets, we do silk screening, so we have a merchandise store. And what we've been trying to do is grow our enterprise, because, listen, before I go into that part of the answer, today we're a $35 million organization, of which we raise $25 million from donors and foundations. $8 million comes from our social enterprise businesses, and the rest of the money, which is only $2 million, comes from government. So we're 95% privately funded. We're not depending upon government funds. Mm-hmm. I would like to get more government funds. It's hard for us to win government contracts because they have their way of helping people. We have our way of helping people, but our way is successful. And thankfully, we're blessed with many donors who sort of see us as getting the money to the services that help people, without a doubt. So my goal over those time where we've tripled in size from 11 million to 35 million is trying to grow all three revenue streams. And without a doubt, we've grown our businesses, we've grown our donor support, but it's about people. So we're a human services organization. Like I said before, over half of our senior staff are former clients. It wasn't always that way, right? And so we've made a conscious effort. Corporations and companies talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. All three good words, all things people should do. In many ways, Homeboy Industries has been doing that for 30 years. And we give, and so to me, it's the perspective I've put in place is we want to have people with lived experience at every level of the organization, not just frontline managers. And so we've made that happen. And part of the learning there is look back, if we have somebody who is applying for a manager's job and one has a college degree and one is an internal candidate, has sort of the intuitive sense and the smarts to do it but don't have a college degree, obviously we don't care about whether you have a college degree or not. Mm-hmm. It's whether you can do the job. I think I've observed this interesting phenomenon that with the population we serve, all their life they've been told they're no good. They've been told in school they're no good. They've been told in the jails they're no good. People wag their fingers at them. And so more than a little bit, they don't believe in themselves. And so I'm going to talk about this concept of promoting people ahead of their time. In the corporate world, oftentimes we promote people. We want to promote somebody and we bring them into the office. We say, we believe in you. Here, do this responsibility for 6 months. And at the end of that, we'll give you that promotion. That's the way it happens most times. At Homeboy, I learned early on, well, that doesn't work because they've been promised things all their whole life and always been disappointed. And so they're not going to go do those extra jobs with the hope of getting promoted. That cliche I live by is, head down, do hard work, and think good things will come. That doesn't play out for the population we serve. And so part of what this is sort of, it's leaning in a positive way to their skills, knowing they can do the job, saying, we're going to give you this promotion. Here's what we want you to do. And 9 times out of 10, they step up and get it done. And so it's thinking about that different, being willing to think about how do you promote from within to get a diverse workforce in a much different way leads to the success of Homeboy. So now we're 3 times the size. We have 3 times the amount of senior staff, more than our clients. They're able to serve more of our people who come in our doors looking for help in a more effective way.
I want to talk about the Kelly Roach Show. I do not take my podcast recommendations lightly, but I have truly admired Kelly's journey from the get-go. She was a fresh employee at a Fortune 500, received 7 promotions in 8 years, all this while building a company that blossomed into an 8-figure empire. Today, she's a best-selling author, top-ranked podcaster, the proud owner and co-owner of 6 thriving companies. And let's not forget, she's an Inc. 500 awardee, proving that growth isn't just a goal, it is a lifestyle. Now, her podcast, The Kelly Roach Show, dives deep into business growth strategies, specifically targeted for those hitting the 6- and 7-figure mark, but it's not all business. She also explores the habits, mindset, and disciplines of the world's most successful people. It's a podcast that's perfect whether you're just getting started or you're trying to up-level your success game. But here's the deal kicker for me. She is a super mom and a wife. She embodies the truth that you don't have to sacrifice your home life for success. She believes and shows that life-changing wealth, wild success, a happy marriage, and a fulfilling home can coexist. That is goal. So tune in to The Kelly Roach Show on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Trust me, it's time well invested. There's a lesson there too, and I'm not sure, I can't remember the exact framework, but when you're giving somebody an opportunity, a good leader knows how to put that opportunity just right outside their comfort zone of their skill set so that they can level up and upskill to that.
That's right.
To that job or the responsibility. And that seems like that's basically the management ethos that you've implemented across the whole organization, and that seems to be like it's working. It is working.
It is working.
Now, there's other things that you've done which I think are interesting with Homeboy. So speak to me about you have 3 revenue streams. You also have done acquisitions of for-profit to subsidize or to add on to those revenue streams. And I want this as more just of a creative business lesson for maybe founders or entrepreneurs or CEOs or executives that are in nonprofits that have not thought of all the different ways that you've thought of to bring in revenue into the company. So you have your donations, you have your direct revenue, and then you have government subsidies, but you've done other stuff. So walk me through that.
Yeah, one good example is we have Homeboy Electronic Recycling. In the state of California, there's all sorts of rules around how do you dispose of electronic equipment in a proper way. And there was this business that started up called Isidore Electronics a number of years ago. And it was, oftentimes small businesses struggle to take that first step up. They need a capital infusion. The woman who started up Isidore Electronics had wanted set it up as a for-profit social enterprise, and we had similar values. She wanted to hire incarcerated people. She wanted to sort of lean into and giving them a good job. Well, what we do at Homeboy still do is not only do we have a business where we have jobs, but we provide a lot of wraparound services to help that person thrive in their life, right? At that time, that businesses needed not just money capital, but also wraparound services. So we acquired that business. Acquired that business about $400,000 in top line revenue. But we're now at past $3 million in top line revenue along the way. We still believe it can keep on growing. So, but we kept that a little bit set aside, and we kept the management team in place, and we wanted to run it with all the hallmarks of a for-profit business, all the things you got to work on the income statement, the cost of goods, the efficiency of labor, all that. But we believe that has enough growth and enough margins in it that we can provide the level of pay, the market-based wages that we want, and have it keep growing. And it's a good business for folks who graduate from our program. We call them graduates, and we land them into that business as a very for-profit oriented business. Right? And so oftentimes at Homeboy, we have a lot of visitors come to us. They ask us how we do the work we do. A lot of other organizations come through, and they always stop in my office and ask about the business side of what we do. Yeah. And one of the first things I say is that think about the business model you want. Make sure you know how to do that business model in a for-profit way, and then be really clear about what of that then makes it a social enterprise organization. So for some companies, it's because they're in the green economy and they're recycling a product. Other organizations like Homeboy, it's about we're going to have more jobs than a for-profit business would have. And so the way I think about our businesses is while they break even, don't make money, the difference between the profit margin that we don't have is we spend that profit margin in extra labor, right? But every other part of the income statement, we are as good as a for-profit business. Our cost of goods sold, our shrinkage, our how we buy, and all that is just as good. But we have more people employed. And as we think about growing businesses, it's about how many jobs can we produce and how many quality jobs are there, and do people have upward mobility in that business model?
I'm curious what your opinion is on nonprofits as an entity being extremely focused on their mission, but less focused on the business fundamentals. And it seems like that was almost even the case before you stepped in. There's a stress on the business. I think that I'm sure some nonprofits have definitely figured it out. But if you think about the traditional nonprofit, I've never heard of a strategy like you've deployed, and even the nuances of what you're focused on in terms of like sound business fundamentals and core business fundamentals. It's not like you're ignoring the mission. Obviously, actually, if anything, you're creating a healthier environment to fulfill the mission. That's but do you find that the average nonprofit needs to focus on their mission, but also look at some of these other strategies that you've deployed? Is that an issue with nonprofits, why they can't have a bigger impact? Or
yes, it's definitely an issue with nonprofits. And also one more issue that gets into that mix is that many nonprofits in the human service space, helping people, have a majority of their funding coming from government contracts, which sort of has the tail wagging the dog at that point. And it's you get pushed into doing things that sometimes doesn't make sense. It becomes very inefficient. So it's this combination of, being in contract compliance, and then, I mean, do you have a skill to run businesses and do contracts? It's kind of hard to do both at the same time. And then all of a sudden you're lost. You have mission creep, and you've lost like the true essence of what you're about. And so what is important is sort of, again, to have a good board in place that kind of keeps you true to your mission. And we luckily have a good board and a founder who sort of, it's so clear. Everybody at Homeboy is so clear. We know what our mission is. And it's just the ways of how we implement it is what varies.
And if you were going to give advice to somebody who actually wanted to start a nonprofit, and they had some business acumen, but not to the level that you had, and they were very mission driven, what would be the steps that you'd recommend so that they don't get trapped in this loop?
Yeah, if they want to start a nonprofit that's a social enterprise, is how I took your question. Yeah, go find somebody who's run that business in the for-profit world. And there are plenty of folks out there, and so many folks, kind of like myself, who've realized, at some point you've made it in business, you've made the money you wanted to make, but how do you kind of shift this to help other people out? So maybe it's like an older person who sort of wants to help the next generation as one way of thinking about it. It could be younger people who've made it and want to help the next generation, but I'm so clear. You have to get somebody who's run it in a for-profit way, and just clearly know, for us, it's the labor line that is different, and that is how we treat our employees that is different. That we have, the labor line means we have more people in place to do the work, because we know we have to give time off for the guy who goes into jail for 3 days to reduce his debt. We know we got to give time off for the woman who has to go see the probation officer along the way. And that's how you have to provide that type of support service and understanding around it.
One thing that I want to speak about, some lessons that you've learned over your career, and you said you've had many pivotal moments in your life because of Homeboy and but also some of the leadership lessons that you deploy as well. So let's just focus on you a little bit, just to sort of tie this up. One of the things that you don't do is you don't take a salary. I thought that was very interesting. Speak to me about why you don't, and maybe just commentary on if it's a good strategy, if it's more of a marketing gimmick. Is it something like, we see billionaires that don't take salaries as well. So what is the benefit of not taking a salary to the organization, to the company, to even the executive team when they look at you? Do they want to model you in some aspect? Speak to me about that decision.
Yeah. And let me just get out of the way. It's not a marketing gimmick, because I kept it quiet for 9 of my 10 years. I never told anybody.
I didn't mean to insinuate it was a marketing gimmick.
But that was in my brain, right? Because, all the way back to Lee Iacocca only, getting paid $1 to produce K cars, right? Right. I told you how old I am. I knew that story, but it's
you dated yourself.
Right. I read books. Good. I read books. Right. But listen, so let me tell you how I got to that point, right? So I come to Homeboy. Look, I feel blessed, but the work, I'm proud of the work we did at ARAMARK. It was a very interesting success story, where it's 93% owned by employees, and so there was a liquidity event, went public, then we went private, and then we got cash. Anyway, made a lot of money, and so. I didn't come to Homeboy to make money. And this is actually, if I can talk more around this question, because it's illustrative of why I think Homeboy is successful. It's just, I was there, it worked for the right time for me and for this organization. I just wanted to come help people, right? And that's, a lot of people want to just go help other people. And so I didn't come to Homeboy with any ego to say, I gotta brandish myself and make myself into a nonprofit warrior. My job was, I wanted to make Father Greg's job easier. I saw the stress. I knew how to run an organization. I saw all the stress he was under. And yet I see the magic of when he's ministering to the homies and how that changes their life around. And so I went and think, okay, I'll just do this. And so the board said, okay, they wanted to hire me. I said, fine. We had to put a salary in place, thinking that's what you do, right? All right. 3 weeks into me taking on the role, me being the smart CEO, I didn't ask the question before I said yes, is how much money do you have in the bank? Can you make payroll? 3 weeks into me taking the role, we have a cash crunch, and not going to make payroll. And so, and this is like that. Now this is like beginning in January. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how this anyway? Long story how it happened, but what do you do? So you're in scramble mode from that moment on. So I did a workforce reduction. We trimmed back expenses, didn't take in as many clients. I stopped taking a salary. And so it was like, and then also we had to borrow money to make payroll, which is, oh boy, any business that has to start borrowing money to make payroll, you know you're in big trouble, right?
Yeah.
But I thought we had the right plan in place. I knew how to move this forward. And it was sort of like betting on ourselves that we're going to make this happen. And so we made it through the year. We finally made it through the end of the year. Fundraising is big in the Christmas time area. So finally, 11 months later, we were getting enough money, paid off the loan, and then had a little bit of money in the bank. And so from there, though, I realized I fell in love with the organization. And so I could have taken a salary, but I was like, why not? With that same money, I knew we could help 3 or 4 more people. And that may not be the right way of thinking about it. I think, like organizations like Doctors Without Borders, they go off and help people in other countries, and they take money? They don't take money. And you sort of get into this whole concept of being guilty and having this, you have resources, they don't have resources type of thing. Mm-hmm. And a little bit it was in that place. But it was, to me, my wife and I just made a decision. Thankfully, we don't need the money. There are more people who need more. There are people who need more money more. All right. So that's our personal decision that we made. But the interesting thing is, foundation world looked at us and say, "Oh, wait a minute, you can't afford to pay your CEO, but what's wrong with you as an organization?"
So it was actually interpreted as a negative.
It was interpreted as a negative, right?
Okay.
Right, yeah. Along the way. And so then, one thing leads to another. But where I stand on this, the other thing but where it helped though is, and it's a very unusual situation. I can't imagine there's going to be many people in this situation. But as I'm kind of working hard, trying to make change happen in the organization from not changing the mission. The mission was always strong. It was like, but are we organized correctly? Are we spending too much money doing all those things? As I'm trying to make change happen, internally it kind of gave a credibility. Hey, Tom's not here to sort of just cash a paycheck and making these nutty things. He's here to we're part of this team. We're all in this together to get the organization to a thriving perspective. And I think that's gone a long way, helping me sort of get the team to move along and get there faster. And so, you get used to it, and then it's like, well, then why start taking a salary at that point after becoming more successful? And so we made it more knowledgeable because I wrote this book, The Homeboy Way, and I wanted to put it out there because, listen, I'm not just, again, it's not just some guy sort of cashing in on Homeboy. It's like, no. I'm all the royalties go to Homeboy, everything we get helps the organization out. It's like, here's a message I really believe in a way of helping poor people in our society. If more organizations and more people get there, the better off.
And how do you as a CEO now, because you're not measured, and you're measured against organizational KPIs, but how would you measure the success of a CEO without a salary? How do you measure that success in your own organization?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, again, it's an easy answer for Homeboy. It may not be as easy for other organizations, right? Easy answer for Homeboy. Do homies show up every day to change their life? And we have more people than we can serve each and every day. And because we're still adding value to their lives. Now, we have KPIs and foundation world. We'll give all those statistics. But the real thing is, every day more people are coming in to help us than we can afford, and we have to turn people away. And so without a doubt, our mission is still strong because of that. And as I measure myself as a CEO, it's like, why are we turning people away? Can we not grow even more so we can help more and more people? So that's the stress in my life, is having to turn people away as an organization and not being able to help them when they're in that vulnerable position. And we know if we're not helping them, no one in the county's helping them. They're back in gang world, gang life, causing problems.
No, I appreciate that. And I just was curious about how you measure more it's very organization dependent, but you're clear on your mission. And I think that's how you measure like true success.
That's right.
Now, I guess to summarize, I mean, you've worked with incredible people. I'm curious, what lessons have you learned from the people that you serve and the homeboys and the homegirls that have, for lack of a better term, made you a better person or made you a better leader?
Yeah. They go into two categories. Early on, look, I wanted to be in Father Greg's orbit as I took on this role, and it's been a great for me to be in his orbit, and I've learned so much from him. But it sounds cliche to say, but it is so true. I have learned more from the homeboys and homegirls than I think I've given them along the way. And what I've learned from them, they are authentic people, no pretenses. The rest of our society have all these pretenses, and we all have all these. We put up these false selves of ourselves and posture and position. Boy, the people who are poor in our society, life's too hard for them to have those pretenses, and so they're pretty they're natural, they're authentic. I invite everybody listening to this, come visit us at Homeboy. You'll feel the energy, you'll feel the love in the room, you'll hear a lot of laughter. Here I come in as a corporate CEO, and there's a lot of laughter, and in meetings I have a lot of joking on. I'm thinking, what's going on? People got to get serious. But what I came to learn is it's in that it's not sarcastic jokes. It's sort of good-natured, self-deprecating, clear, personal, one-on-one. You see laughter, you'll see crying at Homeboy. And so I've learned that they're authentic. I've learned that they've changed their life because, in my words, because they finally understood that God loves them. And once they understand that God loves them, they can love themselves and thereby move their life forward. And so I've seen that they're on this spiritual journey. And I'm thinking to myself, if they're on a spiritual journey, wow, let me pay attention, Tom. You should go on a spiritual journey as well, which has helped. And I have been on that, and it's been great for me. And the third area I've learned from our team is they're the most generous people around. I can't tell you the number of times that I've seen our homies, our clients, take the last $5 out of their pocket and give it to somebody else so they can buy food. I can't tell you the number of times I take some of the team members to lunch, and they only eat part of their lunch. I eat all my lunch. They eat part of their lunch. They get it in a bag. On the way back, they hand it to a homeless person. They have this natural generosity that I think the rest of us in society overthink, and we don't sort of just become expansive with our resources. And so, it's those three things I try to be thinking about and try to do better at.
Now, as you all know, the Success Story podcast is part of the HubSpot podcast network. They have incredible podcasts, so please go check out their roster. But one of my favorite shows is Nudge, hosted by Phil Agnew. You just have to understand that some of the smallest changes can have the biggest impacts on your life. And on Nudge, this is what Phil goes through. He speaks about evidence-backed tips to help you kick bad habits, get a raise, grow a business. Every single episode is bite-sized, 20 minutes. It comes packed with practical advice from some of the most prolific entrepreneurs, behavioral scientists in the world, and it's the UK's fastest growing business podcast. I definitely recommend you go check it out. You should listen to Nudge wherever you get your podcasts. I love that. No, I know there's always lessons, and I'm sure you're in it every single day, so I appreciate that. Anything that I want to get some places to send people, so your socials, website, all of that, but anything, floor is yours, that we didn't cover that you'd like to leave the audience with about Homeboy, about entrepreneurship, about building businesses, about nonprofits. Take it away. Yeah,
just one more topic along the way, and it's a little bit the same theme that I've been mentioning as we go. Look, the working poor in our society struggle, right? And I came into Homeboy as a big believer in the quote-unquote American dream, a big believer in meritocracy, because, I grew up a middle-class kid, took loans to go to college, came out, worked hard, did really well in the business world. And so I believed in meritocracy. What I've seen dead on at Homeboy is, oh no, meritocracy doesn't work for poor people in our society. It just doesn't. And, Martin Luther King has this famous quote that, it's cruel jest to suggest to a poor person to lift them up by the bootstraps when they don't have bootstraps. right? And that's the message I want to get across. So in society, sometimes we wag our finger at people, work harder, they can do more. What I'm trying to say is everybody in the business will realize folks in the front line, workers of our society, a lot of stresses in their life, there's a lot of challenges. If they're not doing a good job, it's not because they don't want to work hard, it's because something else is out there. And so part of this is thinking about how do you kind of help your fellow person in their life. And it's not about kind of, you know, on this, just work hard and you'll get there. You got to kind of create different situations. And the other thing is, to me, I've learned so much. I talked about a little bit my spiritual journey. It's about finding foundational joy. And there's a whole body of work on joy, and Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama have this great book on joy. And it's very helpful to kind of think through how do you bring more joy to your life. And it's you know, in our society, sometimes we think about, I worry about me, you worry about you. But really, you find joy through others. And it's about moving into the relationship with others that is something that we all need to practice more.
Thank you. If people want to get the book, if people want to connect with you, if people want to go learn more about Homeboy or even just reach out, where all the links, all of that, where should they go?
All the links. Well, the book's on Amazon. It's called The Homeboy Way. Clearly, we have a lot of social media links at Homeboy, homeboyindustries.org. We have a Facebook page. We have a LinkedIn page. I would encourage people to go to our Facebook page. We have a lot of content there, a lot of videos of people talking first-person narratives about their story of transformation. They're all inspirational along the way, and it kind of gives you a good flavor for the clients we serve and how we go about it.
Okay, perfect. And then I ask everybody this question to close it up. After your career, after one career in the for-profit and now another life in the nonprofit, what does success mean to you?
Yeah, and I want to in a cliche way duck that question because I come to learn it's not about defining success. It's listen. I now realize I've known God's love me, my spiritual journey is about how to sort of have not understanding God's love, but putting that into action, and how to do that with other people. And so, if I'm doing that every day for the rest of my life, I guess that's the definition of success. There's no measurement to that. There's no end point to that. It's a philosophy, and that's what you work towards.